I think we are live, and I'm really excited about this panel discussion about DeFi and all things decentralization. I want to give an opportunity to each participant to introduce themselves. My name is James Waugh, and I work at Enigma. I'm going to be moderating the panel, but we're going to have some strongly held opinions, I believe, and hopefully some interesting discussion. So I guess I'll pass it to Frank if you want to introduce yourself first, and then we can maybe go around the square. Frank, do you want to give an introduction? We can start with Keenan or Tor if you're having trouble.
Sure. So my name is Frank. I think my audio is a little bit garbled. Are you guys hearing each other garbled, or is it just my audio?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, everybody sounds okay to me.
Try again.
And I'm having trouble hearing you.
Technical difficulties.
Always,
Please stand by.
Always, yeah. Uh-oh.
Cool.
Maybe we can just start with Keenan or Tor while he's getting connected again. Keenan, you want to start?
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, Anna, for setting this up, and James for hosting. It's nice to meet everyone. My name is Keenan Olsen. I'm one of the community managers at Chainlink. Chainlink is a decentralized Oracle network. So we provide tamper-proof data for your smart contracts. Definitely interested in learning a lot more about DeFi and interested in talking with anyone that would like to speak more about what we're working on.
Cool.
So I'm Tor. I'm the executive director at Secret Foundation, which is a nonprofit concentrated primarily on open source, privacy first technologies, networks, etc. We have a particular focus on Secret Network, which is a decentralized protocol for secure computation. We allow smart contracts to use encrypted inputs, outputs, state. We're excited about what that can mean for decentralized finance and open economies. So happy to talk about the current state of DeFi, where we think it could evolve to, how we kind of unlock the next phase of growth, but also want to talk a little bit about the pitfalls that we're seeing in these early nascent stages. Obviously, not everything is working perfectly, and we have to be mindful of the risks as well as the rewards. Hey, Kyle.
Right.
Hello.
Hold X to add member to party. We've got a new participant here. We're just going through introductions, so it's perfect timing if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Kyle. I have been in Bitcoin since 2012. I got involved, and 2013 I started building the world's first Bitcoin-based lottery called World Super Lotto. We did 2 live drawings a week on YouTube, and I had the whole forum going on Bitcoin Talk. That was going until the beginning of 2015. It was just too early, and I ended up jumping on another project called Credits. It was a blockchain as a service based out of the Isle of Man. We worked with the Isle of Man government to do land registry on blockchain, and we were talking to Swift back in the day for cross-border payments. Too early for them at the time. And then in 2018, I just got pretty concerned about the way the space was developing. And it was kind of, I got into the space because I really believe in a revolution from decentralization, and that's what gets me excited. And so in the end of 2017, or actually more so toward 2018, we started hearing this, STOs are the new thing, ICOs are dead. And that kind of bothered me just because there was many bad apples doesn't mean that the whole industry should die. And so I kind of felt like I had been fairly private in the space beforehand, and I wanted to And I didn't see enough people kind of speaking out and talking about the things that I thought were really important. And like in 2017, we saw a lot of really bad projects raise a lot of money and a lot of really good projects not getting the attention. And I thought that was a problem. So in 2018, I started advising some projects, being more public, speaking on at a lot of conferences, and investing in projects. I've been investing the entire time. And then in 2019, I really felt like I wanted to build my own projects instead of working on other people's. So started working on a couple of our own projects, and now Master Ventures is my parent company, and it's like a venture studio model. We have two projects that we're working on. One is called Crypto Exchange Alliance, which is basically an alliance of all the exchanges, and that we will be basically helping them with liquidity, the biggest problem that exists with exchanges, in order to hopefully give them sound business models. Where basically have technology that's been used in the traditional FX space. We're adjusting that to work with digital assets, and so we're basically aggregating all the liquidity from the exchanges, mirroring all the order books back to the exchanges, allowing them to, and then we have a cross-exchange order matching engine that allows a trade from one exchange to be filled by a counterpart in another exchange, and then we have a federated sidechain that we run that does the settlements as well. And yeah, so that's that. And then the other one, House of DAO, that's my passion project. That's kind of challenging every system that we have grown up with in our lives. You know, from education to you know, buying a white picket fence house kind of dream life thing to everything. It's basically a blockchain and crypto emerging technology focused co-working, co-living village out here in Koh Phangan, Thailand, where I live. And yeah, we ran a proof of concept in 2018 for 6 months, had over 100 people from crypto and blockchain come through. A lot of projects were born there. People got married there. And it was a good place to be. So once borders open up, we'll open up the it's called House of DAO, open it up here on Thailand, in a beautiful island. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm working on. And yeah, happy to be here. Early here.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where Frank is. I'm also hearing a bit of an echo, but if Frank comes back, he can introduce himself. I want to get started though, and not hold back any sort of opinions here. We've got a lot of different perspectives, but I've been working with Tor for a bit. You might have missed the intro. I work at Enigma, which is building, contributing to the development of Secret Network, which is for privacy preserving smart contracts called secret contracts.
Nice.
And so we're thinking a lot about DeFi and privacy, but I'm not an expert in DeFi. I'll say that, despite the advertising for this panel. And I want to know from each of you, what is your definition or, your understanding of DeFi without using the words decentralized or finance?
Oh man, that was my definition.
It's too easy.
Oh, that's good. That was the opposite of my definition. I'm happy to take the skeptical view first, but I feel like we should start with the if any of you want to have a much more like positive take on the current state of decentralized finance, I'd rather be a counterpoint than kind of set the tone.
Cool. Yeah. I guess I'll go ahead and start. One thing that I think is kind of like a different look on things is it's finance. Like what are we doing? Like we're shifting value around, which is no different than what we do with our debit cards at the end of the day. So what we're using is just a different technology stack, which is using, decentralized tools in order to be able to do this, where there's really no intermediary or middleman that's technically doing this. Like one meme that I think is kind of funny is like, people are like, what's DeFi? And it's like, drop the D, it's cleaner. And so, like at the end of the day, like eventually this is going to morph into, and we're seeing it more and more every day, into our everyday lives. And so it's going to become more clean. It's going to start, blockchain technology is going to start being integrated into our normal banking lives and so forth. But definitely interested to hear what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation. You know, just thinking of it as finance. But there's another interpretation I've heard, which is really just thinking of it as Ethereum. Uh, so it's somewhere between or somewhere else, I guess. But I don't want to interrupt if Kyle or Tor wants to jump in.
I'd like to hear Tor's perspective and then see if I can give any input on that.
Man in the middle. So my perspective on decentralized finance, I mean, I'm very publicly on the record as being sort of like anti-meme in this space. Like, I like precision of language. I like to talk about like what we're actually building instead of like getting hooked on a particular buzzword that's very difficult to define. Like decentralization as a word itself, I find is impossible to define. So when you extend it to decentralized finance, and we don't really have a concept of what finance even looks like within the blockchain space, like if it's under collateralized lending, that's one thing. If it's 100x leverage, that's another. But like my take on DeFi has been like we were on the right track and we have to make sure that we stay on the right track. So a lot of DeFi now is sort of a shorthand for just leveraged, decentralized leverage, but decentralized meaning more like permissionless. And my vision for decentralized finance is something that empowers individual users on these platforms, something that like levels the playing field for somebody who's coming in not with having a large capital stake, not with having like overexposure to an individual token on a platform or an individual coin. It's something that levels the playing field and gives more access or more possibility, more empowerment, more consent. And if where we're headed is we're just creating a lot of platforms that, again, benefit people who are more capitalized, or the UX is such that people who are more expert in the use of the platform are getting ahead, to me, that's not the vision of, I term it more open economies. That's what I would like to see. Economies that are, you know, more permissive, more equitable. That's what I think blockchain can enable. But if it's just a means of like what our ordinary economy already does, which is reward people who already have positions of power within those systems or greater access to capital or leverage, like then I don't think we've actually changed anything. In fact, all we've done is accelerate the current trends in society, which is just rich getting richer. So tell me how DeFi doesn't do that, and I'm all in. So far, I want to see those platforms be the ones that, as Kyle's saying, like historically, do the right platforms win? Will they win now? What's your take? So
I agree with a lot of things you said. However, I think that it's a bit quick to judge. They are still incredibly difficult to use for the average person, which means that they don't get to benefit from this. Right now, you have the nerdiest nerds making the most money, the guys who really can get in there and know how to use Uniswap and know how to, you know, how to adjust gas fees and things like that. It's not easy. But I think that we're very early, and it's the same kind of argument as for the entire space and us as a whole. We need to be grandma friendly in order to expect it to benefit the masses. And in my definition of decentralized finance is really just recreating traditional financial methods in a way that that has value creation versus value extraction, right? So this is my whole idea with decentralization as whole. And I give this example that we always give for Uber, for example, works again, I think, in coming over to DeFi. Like, you know, you have Uber, which if from your house to the airport costs $100 for the ride. Uber takes $30, the driver pays $70. In a decentralized version, the ride costs $80. The driver gets to keep $79. It's a better deal for the passenger. The driver makes more money. A dollar goes back to people who are securing the network and any type of treasury or something like that, right? So it's a better value creation. We remove the middleman. We remove the profit taking from the business. So if you remove the banks from the situation, you're all the money that banks make, which is billions and billions and billions. Am I still here? Yeah. Am I swinging? Okay. Yeah. All that money, that's money that's being able to be fed back into the people who are becoming the bank, you know. And so we're getting better deals on lending. We're getting higher interest rates on quote unquote saving or staking. And basically just recreating all the tools of traditional financial system in a way that's decentralized which makes a better value for everybody. So as it matures, and it will take time to do so, and I believe that it will do so, and as we get better UX, UI, better tools, ultimately, I believe in decentralization for all kinds of different businesses and applications, not just finance, but also other businesses. Like the Uber example I gave you is a perfect one. And I think that as all of these systems become more grandma friendly, they will become adopted and better for the end user than traditional systems. I'm done.
I don't hear you, James.
No?
Now,
Yes?
yes.
Oh.
Yes, now.
Okay. I was just saying, I agree, and I think the word that comes to mind is accessibility when you're talking about open economies or value creation versus extraction. And it's key to remember that we're talking about removing unnecessary middlemen, especially in the context of DeFi, when it feels like we are creating some new kinds of middlemen. So I want to get opinions on the role of the platforms. You know, we've talked about the users being in control, and we've seen the rise of yield farming and governance tokens in the DeFi space, providing a way for the communities of various platforms to direct the overall evolution of these platforms. Do you see that as a good thing, or is it kind of gimmicky, or even worse, detrimental to the overall quality of decentralized finance applications and their experiences?
So for me, I'm super stoked on DAOs and governance. I think like one of the big things that's a challenge is getting people to participate. There is a lot of speculation in the space, and so people see like, oh, I think there might be a lot of people that would want to vote on these sorts of things and help guide the protocol. But in reality, it's not always that case. There's a lot more of thinking people are. And so I think the more incentivized ways around tokens to actually, these governance tokens to encourage people to participate in this is going to make a big difference. But I think it's huge for the space and huge for decentralized finance and just decentralization in general, and giving people a voice rather than one person at the top of a chain.
Yeah, I think we've yet to see the fully decentralized future by any means, and we're all trying to get there. But in some ways, it feels like decentralization for its own sake is the wrong purpose. But what is the purpose of DeFi if not decentralization?
I guess the problem that I have with a lot of DeFi applications is that they aim to abstract away the human elements of things. So when we talk about the concept of middlemen, there's also this like a middleman is supposed to be usually some sort of like human intelligent agent potentially, and now we're just replacing potentially these human intelligent agents with non-human agents that are still positioned in the middle. Like even like AMMs, like automatic market makers and things like that. Like these are less intelligent agents. They function to provide liquidity to a lot of these ecosystems, but like they're not particularly intelligent, and them created by AMMs is not exactly necessarily serving human end users. Like to the extent that I guess what I'm trying to say is like I want to see like humans in DeFi. Then I'm convinced that we're creating real value at the end of the day, and not just like feeding back the same dollars into the same systems. Otherwise, you're just sort of creating paper wealth and these feedback cycles.
Yeah, like Keenan was saying, if we have proper governance structures, then you have the human element back in the equation. And I would make the argument toward that that these human elements traditionally haven't always been very intelligent, right? They've been greedy, far and above intelligence, in my opinion, right? So the traditional financial market is often and always actually really led by greed, and this is why we saw 2008. This is why we're seeing what happens now. The entire monetary system is completely messed up because we've allowed people with too much power to make decisions, it's I guess just my main argument is that I would disagree with the fact that you think that there's been intelligent intervention or middlemen in the equation before, maybe back in the beginning, but it seems to be a lot of shady things going on behind the scenes, and so maybe that's intelligent for them, but they're benefiting the most from that versus us, the people. When they're marketing to the masses and telling you that it's a good thing to put your dollars in a savings account because you can earn 0.0025%, hooray! And inflation is like 3, 4, 5% right now. They don't tell the commercial should be saying, hey, guess what? You're actually your dollar's becoming less valuable in your savings account, dummy.
Yeah.
These things. Yeah, go ahead.
I empathize with everything that you're saying. There is still a difference between like rent-seeking extraction at scale and like the failures of like surveillance capitalism and the failures specifically of the current state of DeFi, right? There's plenty of issues with decentralized governance, including like Keenan's alluding to, like just the participation problem. Like, how do you ensure that you have the right governance structures in place where you are reflecting the will of the people that are actually participating in these governance structures, and not just, again, like if somebody holds somehow 50% of the governance tokens, at least in a regular democracy, you've got one person, one vote. But now we have the situation where one token equals one vote. What stops somebody from attacking or hijacking a decentralized governance system? Like, the point is, it just needs to be correctly designed from inception. Because once it's improperly designed from inception, you have to have some sort of on-chain governance to then change the design mechanism. Otherwise, so we're constantly in this position where it's like you just have to make sure things are structured correctly up front. And so far, only Bitcoin has really shown to stand the test of time of like, here was an intelligently designed system that has stood the test of time and so far has not collapsed under its own weight, whether you're a proof of work fan or not, right? Like you can still acknowledge that it has stood the test of time better than competing technologies. And our network is, proof of stake. So I'm not trying to start like a POW, POS, any sort of argument in that regard. It's just, we're in such early stages with all of these models. It is going to be like a very long process of iteration and testing. And yes, like booms and collapse before we figure out what's actually sustainable at scale.
Yeah, I think that's, I think people just need to be a little bit more patient. In general, we are attempting we are attempting the most ambitious feats of our generation. We are every one of us is attempting to overthrow legacy systems that have been dominating ever since Industrial Revolution or before. Like even before that, Bitcoin for finance, hundreds of years, is attempting to overthrow that type of system. And we're not going to be able to do, shit, what do we have, smart contracts for 5, 6, 7 years now, 6 years or something like that? Hardly. And it's only matured really recently. And still maybe not even totally mature yet. We're going to have to give it time. We also have to remember that we created quite a bad reputation for ourselves in 2017. A lot of people got hurt. But this is what happens when you create a new type of industry that's unregulated. People take advantage of it, and there's people like all of us here who are building really good things because we believe in it. And there's people who took advantage of the situation and just took people's money, and that's going to happen again in this next bull run. But I think people have expectations that, look how long it took Amazon to turn into a big company. It took quite a long time, and they weren't doing anything that was revolutionary or didn't have to like earn trust of people very much. So I think that I really believe in what we're doing, and I don't have a preference on. I think proof of work is probably the most secure chain, but it doesn't. But at the same time, we haven't had it, and for Ethereum, we haven't had anyone be able to hack the network or anything like that. Right? So I'm all. I think, and I also think that we need to start collaborating more as an industry and stop talking shit about each other. And we could talk shit about the people who have really shitty stuff and really don't know what they're doing. That's fine, and don't care to know. But for those of us who are building things that are quality and that we actually care about what we're doing, there should be a lot more focus on collaboration. I think this is like, I was incredibly surprised well, I had a feeling that the exchanges might be willing to work together because they were all dying due to lack of liquidity, and people thought, no, there's no way. These exchanges are way too competitive. They all have an ego. But what I found to be quite the opposite is true, right? We have over 20 exchanges so far who have joined our alliance in order to work together in order to make a viable system. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, I think governance is the crux of it. We've got to figure out how to coordinate around developing and growing these protocols, that work together. I've heard a lot about composability of DeFi projects, the money Legos idea. I'm curious to better understand how that actually looks in terms of a user's perspective. Like, how do you explain the benefit of money Legos to a Wall Street investor, or maybe just a retail investor, or just some college kid who's trying to learn about investing, like all those levels. Like, how do you get somebody interested in the composability aspect, which seems like the most powerful capability, and it's played out in all of the. I'll let you. Yeah.
Can I was going to comment on this as somebody who grew up playing with a lot of Legos. Because the cool part about Legos for me was the idea that like no one can tell you what to build. It is that permissionless aspect. So if you want to get people excited about money Legos, you talk about the Legos, not the money. Like, you don't want them to think of DeFi as a game or a toy, or they won't take it seriously enough when they build it to build it securely. But you do want to have them think that it's like, look, it's a creative sandbox ecosystem where you can build whatever you want. And if it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, it succeeds. And you're working with hundreds or thousands of people around the globe who are also trying to contribute to the same ecosystem. If this had been a space when I was in college, if there had been this kind of collaborative ecosystem, it would have been amazing. It would have been something I would have immediately wanted to plug into. And that, when I graduated, which was like over a decade ago, it was traditional finance all the way down. There wasn't this alternative. Now that there's an alternative, I think really our responsibility as people building in the spaces, how do you convince people to get more excited about money Legos than Goldman Sachs Legos? And as long as we can do that, and we have the new talent pipeline coming into our side of the ecosystem, then finding ways to like further entrench legacy finance, then at least we've fought our part of the battle. And I would feel good about that.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
I don't. Keenan, maybe you can go ahead. I don't really understand the money Legos analogy, so I'll just
yeah, maybe this will help. So I was listening to a good podcast with this whole Wi-Fi thing that's kind of happening, and I think that's like the easiest example that really like helped it make sense for myself even more so. And if you like think about it just from like stable coins, like so let's just say that you have your savings account and you want to grow your savings account in the most that you possibly can. So you go to one platform, and if you think of each of these DeFi platforms as its own bank, so think of one as like a Bank of America, one's a JP Morgan, one's XYZ bank, like it doesn't matter. But imagine if you can change your savings account between each of these, whenever there was a slight percentage where you can get more yield from each of these. And so what these like money Legos are is being able to transfer, like say you have DAI and it's getting a 5% APY on Aave's platform. Well, the next day you can get 10% on your DAI over on Compound. So you can sit there and pay a little gas fee, move it over there. And so this is the concept of, like building on like these money Legos. And now there's more platforms that are coming out and stuff like Wi-Fi that's super cool, where it's basically algorithmically creating these systems for you and being able to like take a holistic view of each of the platforms. So I think it's big, and especially when you start adding different assets into it and being able to connect assets off chain that are real world, it becomes really exciting.
Yeah, you create based on that, you create healthy competition, in a way, or at least, yeah. I mean, this is good. It's the anti-monopolistic decentralization kind of idea.
Yeah, and like one thing that I like kind of forgot is like how do they get that 5% yield? Like, where's that come from? And the whole thing comes down to like free market economics and, you know, the supply and demand. Like, are more people depositing on this or more people trying to borrow on this? Like that's how they end up getting these APRs coming from it. And so, you know, it kind of takes a whole lot of different concepts of, you know, this traditional world that we see, and allows anyone to be able to participate no matter where they are in the world, no matter how much money they have. Obviously, like, that's becoming a little more difficult based upon like gas, but there's a lot of other options that could be there in the future as well to be able to make this, and a lot of people that are working on solving that sort of problem.
Well, yeah, and you know, paying fees certainly doesn't amount to the same level of, you know, accredited investor level of requirements, you know.
Right.
But yeah, I think you know, we have the opportunity to imagine a system for decentralized finance across blockchains, and I'm curious to hear opinions about that, because a lot of people might say Ethereum is DeFi, and you know, anything on Ethereum is DeFi, and that's what DeFi means. But you know, personally, I think decentralized finance requires interoperability and a multi-chain ecosystem for it to really be DeFi. What do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we have, I mean, if Ethereum doesn't manage to scale, which we expect public testnet coming soon, but you know, I went to go buy something the other day on Uniswap, and I paid, I think $1.50 was my fee, and an hour and a half later, the transaction didn't process, so I had to go do replace buy fee, and spend $2.25 to get that push through. Like, that's not cheap, and so it's really going to be, you know, it's the same thing with the Legos on the things being built on top of the underlying protocols. Of the same thing with the underlying protocols, right? It's going to be, you know, who has the most secure. And unfortunately, I don't think that people are even taking the security into consideration right now. But this is one of the reasons I think that I'm a really big fan of Ethereum if they manage to scale, because I think that one thing that they realize is that you can't mess with security. You know, it needs to be incredibly secure. And a lot of the guys that are coming out with these new protocols that are doing tens of thousands of transactions per second, and they put it up in 6 months or a year. I don't think they really thought security all the way through. You know, there's probably a reason why Ethereum is taking so long to scale, because they understand that if there's a major problem with security in the protocol, you're probably going to lose trust of a lot of most people for a very long time. So, but I mean, but there is a clear need for scalability. The Ethereum network is getting overloaded, and yeah, nobody wants to wait an hour and a half and then have to go in there and try to figure out how to cancel a transaction. It's not easy. I had to look it up. So yeah, but it's exciting to see the different possibilities. And right now you've got decentralized finance being built on all kinds of different protocols. You know, you've got Polkadot coming out. You've got Rio DeFi. You've got Elrond is working on it. You know, you've got the interoperability solutions like you're talking about, James. So it's exciting to see, you know.
I'll speak to the Cosmos ecosystem, since that's where we're building. I mean, you see what's happening with a lot of the protocols in that space. I mean, Secret Network is just one, but with the Cosmos Hub, with Kava, with Band, you're seeing just an explosion in interest of that's an ecosystem that's primarily concerned with interoperability and looking at bridges to other ecosystems, and at the same time trying to lay the fundamental groundwork that's going to support next generation DeFi applications or other types of decentralized applications. So it's interesting to hear you continue to make the point around security, because we personally have a focus on privacy, specifically like input data privacy, output privacy, privacy for encrypted state. Like, we believe that if you can solve those kind of like fundamental issues, those continue to get pushed to the side, because it's so tempting to snap everything together, to make this talk to this. It's so tempting to move fast and break things. But like you're saying, like, it compromises the security of the application layer of these protocols, to the extent where if these applications scale too fast, it can compromise the security of the layer one protocol itself. Like, we have to acknowledge how these different layers fit together, interact, how the incentive structures interact. We can't allow that to collapse under its own weight, or to provide incentives to collapse these platforms under their own weight, or to create environments where fees are $10 for a basic smart contract interaction. So part of what we think about is how can we build for sustainability at the same time as you build for security, as you build for like user privacy and interoperability. You're talking about solving like 20 things at once. Obviously, we're in the very early stages of all of this, but the one thing I'm hoping we would all agree on this panel is, like, if you're thinking about interoperability, at least what you're doing is you're thinking already at the greatest possible scale. As long as you're solving something for like every public blockchain ecosystem, then you're thinking at the right scale. If you're only solving something for like a narrow corner of the blockchain universe, maybe it works in your tiny little corner, but as soon as you try to be more relevant than that, solve problems for more people than that, you're going to run into the same problems that Ethereum is already running into, right? Like, you can be an Ethereum competitor serving 10 users, and yeah, those 10 users are going to experience better performance. But you're just going to have the exact same issues that Ethereum is already running into when you try to get past that scale. So I don't take the win, today just because it's working for the 10 people you've got. Think at Ethereum scale, but also think at like global scale. Think about those millions of users. And as long as you've got that in your head up front, I think you're at least thinking down the right path.
Yeah, 100%. And from like a chain link with us, we're able to, I don't think that DeFi should be just like narrowed down to, it's only Ethereum. Ethereum is DeFi, because that's not the case. There's DeFi products that are on Polkadot already. There's DeFi products that are on Cosmos, like you're saying. There's DeFi Binance Chain. There's a DeFi product.
Probably not DeFi.
Yeah, I mean, everything's debatable. Yeah, and so, and yeah, I mean, like for us, like it doesn't matter which one of these chains are on Polkadot. We have a pair chain that people are able to use Chainlink oracles. We work with Kava to be able to provide Chainlink oracles for anyone that's on Cosmos network, and we're able to work with, BSN that's in China through Cosmos and Iris network. And so we see a lot of different, it doesn't matter where people are building, we just want to be able to provide a tool for other people. And I think that's something that's really special, and not to just get locked in on Ethereum itself.
I think everyone's just worried there's only so much security to go around. And so that creates conflict, when really it's a system of many blockchains that are together greater than the sum of each network. That's my vision for the multi-chain future. We have to coordinate around shared goals, or else nobody's going to care. That's what is required to get from this level of adoption. People are kind of familiar with Bitcoin, and maybe every now and then someone has heard of Ethereum or one of the other blockchains randomly, but we really want to be impacting everyday people's lives, and we're far from that, I believe. And DeFi seems like a good move in the right direction, but it's got plenty of risk. There's all kinds of wayward paths, tempting paths we could take with DeFi, and I think there's already been some issues with exploitation, manipulation, just plain old fraud. We've got to overcome these challenges, because the pitch is really an unregulated market for financial instruments, and that's definitely not an easy sell in some circles. So I want to stop rambling about it and see what people think about the regulatory challenges, if that's something that we need to be concerned about. Is there a balance of a regulated DeFi ecosystem? Is that something that could happen, or is it just blazing forward, no holds barred kind of decentralization?
Be right back in 2 seconds. Grab my dog real quick.
Okay.
Is your dog a regulator? Should we be concerned? I mean, my take on that is, like, we're already regulated. Like, regulators are already watching the blockchain space and everything else. I think the challenge is just just like us, they don't really know how to approach it. Everything that we're building in DeFi is sort of a square peg in a round hole. Like a lot of these regulations were written back in a time when we were still on the gold standard. So of course, we're also breaking new ground in the legacy finance world right now. We've never seen like a global negative interest rate environment. So I think regulators are just struggling right now to say like, what should be the right framework for innovation, for global finance for the next like 20, 50, 100 years. But don't lose sight of the fact that we are already regulated. Like everybody building in the space builds at their own risk. They have to understand that this is not like a parallel universe in the way that we think. Like this is very much something that we're trying to build in tandem with the legacy finance world. We need fiat on ramps. We need fiat off ramps if we're going to do anything that's viable at scale. But yeah, I guess the shorter answer to your question is like, you will see more regulation looking at these kinds of, especially like these leverage products and these yield farming products. Like it's inevitable. The guidance won't make sense. It'll be inconsistent. It'll differ by jurisdiction. And that's just something we're going to have to live with. It can't slow down the level of innovation, but it's something that we're all going to have to live with in the back of our minds. And we're all going to have to take attack of, let's be innovators as much as we're educators. Let's help regulators understand what it is we're trying to achieve and show how it's, helping them with their own missions and ethos of protecting consumer interests and, making finance something that works for the everyday person while protecting them.
Yeah, I guess what I meant by unregulated is unprecedented. And I certainly wouldn't.
Slightly different concept, I suppose.
There is no regulation, but we're still figuring it out. I believe that's fair to say.
I have something to say about that. I think that so this is the whole reason that I started Crypto Exchange Alliance was because I saw a lot of issues from exchanges and a lot of bad practices being executed. And so a lot of people just kind of said, well, let's like regulation will fix this. We just need regulation. And I think that that's a lot of people who are kind of that's just the old world way of thinking coming through. That's what they kind of have always relied on is regulation to fix things or make things better. However, when you look at somebody like Binance, for example, who has been in unfavorable regulatory environments before, what did they do? Binance CZ picked up his ass, picked up his laptop, and went somewhere else and said, "Hey, this place is a lot more regulatory friendly. I will just stay here for a while." And then that place said, "You know what? You can't be here anymore." He said, "Okay, no problem. See you later. I'll go somewhere else." And then it happened again. He's like, "I'll see you later. I'll go somewhere else." And and that's something that someone right now in a centralized exchange can do. Imagine how difficult it would be to enforce local regulation on a global level for somebody who's running an exchange out of Uganda and it's running 100x leverage to traders in the United States. Imagine the amount of resources that would be required to go after that one individual who's running this exchange in a country where he's running it out of a data center in the middle of the jungle in Uganda or something like that, like or desert or whatever. Like, it's not going to be easy. For the first time ever, really, we have now projects or businesses being born with the intention of a global target demographic. No longer is it a regional business that's opening, then maybe they go to national level, and then after they become like a publicly traded company, maybe they start approaching different markets at this point. We're launching from the day one and saying, I don't care where you live in the world, you can come use our product. And so I'm just wondering how people expect local regulators to enforce legislation on an international level. I don't think it's going to be feasible. So the way I am trying to solve this is I think that we need to look at what else works in the world to help make people abide by best practices and standards, because that's what it's all about, right? So if you're raising money and you throw up a DeFi project, maybe you should put a percentage of the fees that are being incurred in the network to an insurance fund or something like that. That would be a responsible thing to do, right? Maybe that should be a best practice. So I think that what we need to do is create more independent, best practices and standards types of boards that create, a global standard. This is something I would like to do for the exchange industry, and it should be something that doesn't stifle innovation but protects the end user, because that's what we all concerned about, right? Like Tor said, when these regulations come out, they're not going to be very nice. They're not going to make sense. That people are just going to see it scratching their head and being like, when they start talking about how they have to tax every single transaction that you have in crypto, even if it's a loss, you're like, what the fuck? That doesn't make any sense. How and they don't understand. I mean, we move at such a fast pace. And regulation moves at such a slow pace. It's impossible to keep track. So if we could, the example I always use that has been incredibly effective. If you live in North America, especially in America, and you've been to the grocery store, you've probably seen this logo on food that says non-GMO verified. It is the most powerful and effective food logo or food stamp, whatever, in the entire United States. To about 10 years ago, when GMOs became on everyone's radar, and people weren't really sure if they wanted to eat them or not, but a lot of people kind of felt that they didn't want to eat them. Monsanto, the company that creates all these GMO products, they're way too powerful. They've got way too much money, way too many deep pockets in Washington, D.C. There's no way we could ever expect that they would have to label their products as GMO, right? So these guys from these grocery stores in some hippie town got together and said, hey, maybe we should create a nonprofit that will certify food manufacturers that don't use GMO, and we'll call it non-GMO project, and everyone who goes through this certification will become verified, and they can start using this food label on their food packaging. And it is incredibly effective. I mean, if you go to the grocery store and you want to buy a box of cornflakes, and there's box A and box B, and they're relatively the same price, and one of them has this logo on it and the other one doesn't, almost subconsciously, you will pick the one with the logo every single time. Why not be, even if you're not super you're like, well, I don't know if it's good for me or not. I better not take it, And if we do the same thing for this industry and we start creating best practices and standards, and things that will protect consumers, like for exchanges, if we make sure that they have maybe some type of insurance fund, or if they're being transparent, if they're not wash trading, if they're not front running, if they are securely storing funds, things like this should be the standard. And we could have independent third parties that do audits periodically, randomly, once a year, whatever. And if they pass this best practices and standards, they can use this logo on their marketing, and people will then know that they have options. They can use a product that has voluntarily gone through this best practices and standards audit, or they can use the alternative, and they're much better off using the one that's volunteered to go through this process, because that they're following best practices and standards to protect the end user.
That's a great example.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit, because that is a fun conversation. We'll remember fondly. And the next thing I want to talk about is the two things I believe DeFi currently lacks, and that is an effective decentralized identity system. And there's a lot of good work in that regard. And the second, which goes hand in hand, is privacy solution. There's not really good privacy solutions. You can tell why I'm interested in that, but I wouldn't have gotten interested in what Enigma is building without encountering so many conversations about the lack of privacy in the blockchain space. And we're talking about regulatory issues that I feel might be relevant for this next discussion about identity and privacy and DeFi. First, just wanted to get general thoughts. Is it something that you feel is urgent? It's preventing adoption, or is it just kind of a nice to have feature that every platform should consider?
Yeah, I think like decentralized identity would be cool. I think it's not really stopping any of this from growing exponentially. Within privacy, I'm really fascinated by privacy, and one company that's able to do private transactions on Ethereum, if you haven't heard of, is called Tornado Cash. And so they use Chainlink oracles. Definitely recommend everyone to check them out. But basically, you can submit an Ethereum transaction, and then it creates goes through a tornado cycle. They do mix it around with some transactions, and it ends up private. And so that's something that's really fascinating to me, and definitely recommend for everyone to check out.
Sounds super regulated.
Not yet.
You used a lot of our trigger words there, but I'm not. That's fine. This is a YouTube stream. But when it comes to privacy, so I mean, you're touching on something that I care a lot about, right? So what we talk a lot about with Secret Network is, transactional privacy gets thrown around a lot, like the idea that you can obscure sender, obscure receiver, obscure amount, and like that's enough to provide user privacy. But like what's not happening there is we're not allowing for like arbitrarily complex privacy control within applications. You're really just restricting user choice. And in a lot of cases, right, like especially with like if it's mixers, like your protection, your privacy protection is only as good as the amount of people who actually care enough about privacy on your platform to seek it out independently. So what we write about is programmable privacy, this idea that we can have decentralized applications, smart contracts that allow for these kind of these sort of arbitrarily complex privacy controls or access control. And it's combining this idea of like having transactional privacy with the idea that you can have like a complete smart contracting platform, like combining the best parts of Ethereum with the best parts of a Monero. So that's really the vision of Secret Network. That's why we have a passion for like privacy and DeFi in particular. Is like we think that privacy is inherent to user empowerment, not because you're trying to hide your activity from these platforms, but because by providing programmable privacy, you're actually increasing usability of these platforms, right? You're eliminating the risk of front running. You're allowing for these wider anonymity sets to bring these benefits to the entire interoperable universe of DeFi rather than to these like very restricted applications of like wallet specific mixers. So hopefully we're successful in that. But either way, like the first win would be like, can we at least get everybody to care about privacy in the user experience? And I'm hoping that as a space, we come to focus on that more because there's such a link between privacy and security. And if your DeFi platforms are not secure, then all you're doing is you're building up a house of cards that's just going to collapse and hurt end users at the end of the day. And the last thing you want for a burgeoning space like DeFi is for the majority of users to be hurt. Then you destroy the entire decentralized. You basically salt the earth. And what we're trying to do is like keep it so that we can continue to have these green sprouts of innovation for years to come.
Yeah, I mean the idea of programmable privacy is just another level, and it's just more generalized than the idea of transactional privacy. So it gets lost in the conversation about zero knowledge proof schemes, and all the different methodologies that are plenty interesting, and love talking about that stuff. But when discussing practical solutions that enable privacy for DeFi users, you might want to look into secret contracts and this idea of increasing anonymity sets. Really what it does, you don't just have the Tornado Cash pool for mixing, but you can actually use your mixed or pooled funds in DeFi applications, which are secret apps. So I'm really excited to share more about that. Don't want to get too derailed away from the conversation topic, which is all things decentralization. So I wanted to
follow you guys on Twitter, so I'll definitely make sure to check it out.
Well, then this has been productive. So thank you, and we will end the panel with a few rapid fire questions, if you guys don't mind. First, I wanted to just say, like, I still don't know what DeFi means, but that's okay. I'm still learning. I'm excited to keep learning, and I will continue participating. And I've always been fascinated by the idea of automated market makers, and I think that really changes the game because it solves the liquidity problem, and that's what has kickstarted this whole movement, and now we've got governance tokens and all sorts of fun experiments. It's really blurring the lines between what used to be known as open finance and just general smart contracts and decentralized applications. But my rapid fire questions are threefold. It's just yes or no, whether something is or is not DeFi. So the first question is Coinbase DeFi?
No.
No. Okay. All right. That was good. Rapid fire. Next question. Is staking DeFi?
That's a lot more interesting. How, like, if yield farming is DeFi, is staking DeFi? I mean, in the same, like, it sort of depends. What is accessibility for the token, right? If anybody can acquire the token, if anybody can stake the token, if it has governance aspects, if there's a return, especially for people who are then like they have to provide hardware to keep their node online, or if they're slashing penalties for going offline. All of this has the same hallmarks as so many of these other DeFi platforms. I would lean towards, yeah, that's DeFi.
Oh yeah, I'm all there, 100% DeFi. Next question: are non-fungible tokens DeFi?
Definitely becoming more and more of a part of it.
I haven't seen it yet, but I haven't heard of a use case for it yet. But
so there's some that are coming out where instead of yield farming, just some sort of token, you're yield farming for a non-fungible token. So there's more use cases that are coming out more and more. One thing that Chainlink is working on too is it's called Chainlink VRF, verifiable random function. So being able to create, what about like a decentralized gambling game or any sort of decentralized game, which, there can be some sort of finance and involved with those. So, it's almost like a part of it, it's like a spike from it. It's not, just straight what you would consider DeFi, but it helps bridge to it.
Cool. All right, bonus question before we wrap things up. Is Dogecoin DeFi?
definitely.
Yeah, I think that.
I can't think of anything that's more DeFi.
Cool. Well, and
DogeFi.
DogeFi is everything. But
Is TikTok DeFi?
TikTok?
Yeah.
Rapidly becoming so. I get all of my investment advice from TikTok.
It's the best place to get it.
I would say 15 seconds or less, baby.
Yeah. Well, this has been really fun. I want to give each of you the opportunity to share some closing thoughts, where to find you, any exciting updates around the corner that you'd like our audience to know, and then we'll say adieu.
Cool. Yeah. Anna, thanks a lot for helping set this up, and thanks all the other panelists for joining. It is a lot of fun. Always doing a lot of different events at Chainlink, so definitely check us out at events.chain.link. You can follow me on Twitter, just Keenan Olsen. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for joining.
Thanks, Keenan. Yeah. So for myself, I've been in the space a long time. Like I said, 2012, and I recently started becoming more public. So, if you guys want to follow what I'm doing, my Twitter and YouTube is the same. It's just my name. I think Twitter is Kyle_Chasse. YouTube is just Kyle Chasse. I feel like I have a pretty good insight into the industry, and as opposed to like a lot of other people who are on YouTube, for example, who just kind of recently got in the industry and are just kind of talking nonsense. So yeah, that's how you can follow me. If you guys are interested, and I know that we've all been locked up for a very long time. If you feel like when the borders open up, coming out and hanging out with a bunch of crypto people, the 24/7, 365 conference environment, come out to this beautiful island in Thailand, Koh Phangan. We have a House of DAO being built where It's just going to be a conference-like environment, 24/7, 365. Invite all of you guys to come check it out. It is a lot of fun. Beautiful place to be. Good collaboration. Lots of really, really brilliant people in the space here. And yeah, would love to see all you guys come out and visit us.
Sick. I put my information for my personal Twitter and then for the Secret Network Twitter in the YouTube chat, but I'm just at Bair, or you can do at Secret Network. I wrote a blog post about DeFi that's a little more negative than some of the views I put here, but I guess it's actually positive if you think about it on a different time scale. Like, we're building something super cool here. The more we can avoid getting lost in the hype bubble of, like, you know, number go up in the short term or value locked in DeFi go up, like, that's not the metrics I care about. But if we can get millions of users onboarded into the space, then, you know, that's ideally what we're all here to do. So if you're interested in doing that, hit me up. Everything you guys are talking about, Kyle, Keenan, like, I'm super jazzed about, so I will hit you guys up as well. But thanks for having us on the panel. Thank you, James, for moderating. Super awesome views, extremely reasonable people. I hate it, but that was super fun. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and thanks to Frank, our last compadre.
Oh, Frank.
Yeah.
Sorry, Frank.
We'll catch up with him later. And thanks to Anna and the Blockchain Center for organizing this. And best of luck with that new development. And yeah, thanks for listening and watching, and hopefully, you know, not getting too bored or frustrated with our strongly held opinions. But with that, peace. Have a good one.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.